non-miraculous, because it, in fact, was miraculous. There was amazing things that happened through his ministry. There were signs, there were wonders, and the idea of signs was that they were indeed a sign authenticating the message was, in fact, from God. They were wonders that caused people to be amazed, again, going back to validating his message, okay? So the chief purpose in those things was to authenticate his message. It doesn't mean that miracles can't happen today, but these miracles, these wonders had some very specific tasks and purposes for them. So it would be wrong to think of the Apostle Paul's ministry of being non-miraculous. But it would be worse to think of it as simply being so supernatural that it really has no bearing on your life or mine. Because that's simply not true. Not true at all. The Apostle Paul's life was not one that was just regulated to some amazing miracles and even academia, but of rigorous application of the truth of Jesus Christ. Take a look at some of these words that we see here. Accomplished, obedience, deed. These are all very active things that we see, that we can actually be expressed and touched. How about your life? Is it just filled with vain affirmations of truth and of Jesus and He's the way and blah, 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 but you don't see it in your life? It doesn't show up in your checkbook. It doesn't show up in your calendar. It certainly would be shocking to some of your friends and acquaintances if they actually knew you were a genuine believer. It needs to show up in word and deed. Later this summer, we're so convicted about this as a church, is that on August 9th of 09, so that's 0809 of 09, we're going to have a special time as a church, and yet it's not going to be in this auditorium. Specifically that day, we are going to spread across the community, and our goal is to see at least 500 to 600 of you. Maybe you'll blow us out of the water and we'll see all 1,000 participate in this, where we're going to have a number of projects set up across the entire community where our express purpose is simply to allow our light to shine. Just to love on people because we can. The Scriptures say, let people see your good deeds that they might glorify your Father which is in heaven. And that's going to be the goal on August 9th of 2009, where we say, you know what, don't go to church, be the church. In fact, if you show up here, you're going to be the only one here. I guess it'll probably be open, but there'll be a number of other places where hopefully you can find us across the community where we're going to try to do some specific acts of service where we can show the light that's been given to us. If you don't have that sort of faith on a practical basis that leads to deeds, that leads to obedience, that people can see what's been accomplished, I humbly submit to you that something has got to change. Something's got to change. You see, a confession of faith without a change in values just stinks. In fact, it reminds me of this incident years ago when we first were involved in full-time ministry. This was before kids, though, and my wife and I were out to go visit this elderly couple in this portion of town where we were living at the time. And it was right kind of just coming out of winter, so it was kind of cold and hot. And one other piece of information you need to know to appreciate the story is that we had this dog at the time which had a very amazing gift. He had an innate ability to always go in the yard right where you were about to step, okay? So you could go ahead through your yard and step in something, and based on the temperatures of the time of year, you could step in it and have really no idea that you did, and just keep on right on going on your day. As such was the case of this unfortunate afternoon. So we were in a hurry, as it was, and I was determined to get actually this time stopping by, seeing this couple done as quickly as I could, because truthfully, I did have another A, B, C, D, E, F, G that I was trying to get due that day. And so as I walked up to their house, after I had walked through my yard and done a short drive over to their home, where I was not in the car long enough to allow anything to heat up to any degree it would have been helpful to know, I stood at the door, and I remember purposing in my mind that I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible, so although I know these folks tend to be very gracious hosts, in fact, maybe like you, they have this same rule where you take off your shoes at the door, and then you come and you sit for a while. And I remember thinking in my head, I said, you know what? I'm going to keep my shoes on. Because if I keep my shoes on, then I can get out of there that much quicker. And so I had it all kind of figured out in my mind, and so we opened the door, and she invited us in, and normally this is where you kick off your shoes, but she, being very gracious, saw that I wasn't kicking off my shoes, so she just invited me to come. So I went ahead and walked across their white carpet, but everything was still frozen, so that's nice. And so we went ahead and we sat down. Amy and I were here at this couch. They were kind of over here at this couch, and we were having kind of conversation here, like so. And so as we were sitting there, of course, being a little bit older folks, I think the house was a medium 89 degrees. And so as we were sitting there and we were talking, I remember thinking, man, I just remember this house smelling so much better than what it does. And I thought, well, it's probably just my imagination. So we were talking, and a little bit more time passed, and then I realized, that's no imagination, baby. There's something that really stinks. And so I'm carrying on this conversation the whole time and just trying to figure out at the same time, where is this smell coming from? So I have my wife to my side, and so I just kind of drift over and smell Amy. Is it her? No. And so go back, and we're still just sitting there, and again, just trying to carry on the conversation, pretending everything's fine and nothing's abnormal, which it truly is at the moment, and I'm just desperately trying to figure out what's going on. And then as we're continuing to talk, I just happen... I take my arm away from my wife, and I happen to do one of these. I'm not sure if you ever cross your leg like this, and my hand happens to go right on my shoe, okay? And then suddenly a piece of my shoe falls off into my hand. And so there I am, sitting in their living room, and I'm holding this dog poo in my hand. And the first thing that goes through my mind is, I'm just going to kill that dog. I'm just going to kill him. And the second thought is a little bit more practical. It goes like, well, what do I do now? Do I just slip it into my pocket and act casual? I mean, what do you do here? You're holding this in these people's living room. And so, as it was, I was able to excuse myself. They never knew, and I was able to clean up the situation. But the reality of the matter is, many of our lives smell like that. Something stinks. Something's not right. And it's because we haven't dealt with the junk in our life. And we're sitting there with a smile on our face, holding dog poo. You see. God would have us change that situation, people. God would have us change that situation. You see, the Apostle Paul's ministry, again, was one of both word and deed. Do you have that in your own life? Colossians 2, 6 and 7 says, just as you received Christ Jesus as Lord, continue to live in Him. The same conviction where you realize indeed that you are a sinner is the same conviction you need to carry with you day to day, not in questioning your security before God, but understanding you need Him today. You need to allow your faith to be seen today. You see, the Apostle Paul indeed had a powerful ministry. And a core characteristic that we need to assimilate from it is a devotion pledged to Jesus Christ. That means our church life, our home life, our work life, our school life, our sex life, our friend life, all these lives should come together in a devotion to Jesus Christ. And is seen and is evident by the way in which we live. Romans 15, 19 through 21 as we begin to wrap up. So that from Jerusalem and all the way around Illyricum, I have fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Christ, and thus I make it my ambition to preach the gospel, not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation. But as it is written, those who have never been told of Him will see, and those who have never heard will understand. This was a modest summary of the Apostle Paul's ministry. If you want to kind of get an idea of distance of